As we indicated in our inception lesson, the second part, that we're going to add management accounting and financial management and financial accounting. Today we want to start with a very important topic in management accounting. A topic that as a professional accountant, or in fact a management accountant, you will need to practice is one of the modern evaluation techniques that every modern management accountant must possess the concept and the skills in applying that. And that has to do with activity-based costing. So subsequently, we will be looking at financial management, and then we'll take it one by one. So we're looking at all the topics in financial management, as we have started with management accounting. We also do other topics in financial management, as well as all the topics under management accounting. Don't worry, we'll also be adding financial accounting. Please, the only thing you can do to help us is to subscribe to our videos. If I subscribe to our channel, share our videos with others. Let others also benefit from this knowledge we are all benefiting from. Share with others. The only thing we can do to support this course is to help share these lessons with others. So kindly share, not just learn, not just acquire this knowledge and keep it to yourself. Share with others to also benefit from this knowledge we are all giving freely, and also subscribe to the channel. Thank you. So today our focus is going to be on activity-based costing, also popularly known as ABC. And before we can really appreciate activity-based costing, we have to go to the introduction to management accounting. Introduction to management accounting to appreciate some concepts over there. So we will build on that concept, which is the activity-based costing. One thing you're supposed to note is that activity-based costing is a modern management accounting concept, which is moving from the traditional management accounting technique or concept. So, assuming that we are a business, in fact a manufacturing business, and we produce product A and then product B, these are our products. These are our products. And you barely want to determine the cost per product, okay? You want to determine the cost per product. So here, remember that we will need our variable production cost. So that we call the direct material cost for X, in fact for product A and product B. For product A and product B, we need our direct labor cost. We need our direct labor cost for A and B. We also need our direct expenses in case there is any for A and B. Then we need production overhead cost. Now, from the name overhead, if you look at this name, if you sum up this, we are getting what we call prime cost. Prime cost. And this prime cost is the summation of your direct cost. The summation of your direct cost. In other words, we are saying that these costs are costs, we can easily trace them to the product. In terms of looking at divisions or departments, we can trace these costs to the department. They can be traced to a particular cost center or a cost unit. So there is no need or there is no hurdle when we want to determine the cost to a particular cost product, because we know that when we're producing this material, when we're producing this product, we incurred or we used this amount of what material. When we're producing this product, we use this amount of what of labor cost. You see, so you can trace them, so there's no hurdle. But let's come to the overhead cost. Overhead costs are the summation of indirect costs that an entity incurred. They are costs that we cannot trace them to a particular product, we cannot trace them to a particular cost center, we cannot trace them to a particular cost unit. So when that happens, there is a need for us to apportion. There is a need for us to absorb that overhead cost to the product. So let me give a typical example. Assuming that we use electricity in producing both A and B, which portion of the electricity expenses should we attribute to A? which portion of the electricity expenses should we attribute to B? So because these you know because these costs are general in nature, that we cannot attribute them directly to a particular product or a particular in fact a particular product or a particular cost center. There is a need for us to apportion the overhead cost, that is the electricity bill, to the product. And traditionally, what we used to do is that we apportion these overhead costs using what we call overhead absorption rate. So we use what we call overhead absorption rate. That is what is normally used in sharing these overhead costs, or apportioning. The right word is apportioning these overhead costs to the product, to the product, to the product. So for instance, let me give a practical example. Assuming we are producing 2,000 units of A, and then um, let's say 1,000 units of B, okay, and then the overall production overhead, okay, the overhead, we can also have it to be fixed production overhead is 10,000, 10,000. And for us to produce one of the units, we need 1 hour over here, and then we need 2 hours for uh, B. Now, how do we apportion this 10,000 to A and to B? How do we apportion this 10,000 to A and to B? That is where the issue lies. So, traditionally, we use the overhead absorption rate. This overhead absorption rate is used on the basis of an activity level, either machine hours or labor hours. Let's look at what goes into it. So, it is your budgeted production overhead costs. So your total budgeted production overhead cost, which in this question is 10,000, is a budgeted because we are assuming to be determining the cost for the actual production. So this is budgeted. After it, when we have incurred the actual fixed cost, that is when we are going to compare the budgeted with the actual to determine whether we have over-absorbed or we have under-absorbed. These concepts are all attributed to the introduction to management accounting. So it is not examined under management accounting. In ACC, we call it performance management. It's not attributable to performance management in ACC, but in the normal professional exams, we call it management accounting. So your budgeted production overhead divided by the budgeted activity level. Now this activity level here is basically total hours. Is basically considered to be total hours, either total hours, total labor hours, or either total machine hours, or sometimes we look at production units. So our budgeted activity level can either be based on, we can either apportion this overhead cost on the basis of labor hours, on the basis of machine hours, on the basis of what? Of the production units. So that is what we traditionally do. So in this case, let's assume we are apportioning this overhead cost on the basis of what? Labor hours. Then it is going to be your budgeted total production overhead, all divided by the total labor hours you need in producing both A and B. So here our overhead absorption rate here is going to be the total hours of 10,000, all divided by how many hours do we need to produce. This is per unit. Okay, so we need 1 hour to produce one. So we multiply it by unit, because here we need total hours. Okay, so we need 1 hour per unit, 1 hour per product. So we are going to produce 2,000 plus how many hours do we need for 2? We need 2 hours multiplied by total number of what unit we are producing. So in this case, we are going to get 10,000 all divided by, this is 2,000, this is 2,000, all divided by 4,000. I think this is going to give us $2.5, assuming this is in dollars. This becomes our overhead absorption rate. overhead absorption rate. Now we are going to apportion, we are going to absorb this production overhead on the basis of the overhead absorption rate. In this question, the overhead absorption rate here would have been the hours here. So because we are using the basis of hours, it would have been 1 hour here multiplied by the 2.5, and then this one would have been 2.5 times 2, which will give us 4 for product B, and for product A would have been $2.5. So you see, traditionally, this is how we apportion. This is how we absorb. This is how we absorb our production overhead cost. This is how we absorb into the product or into the cost centers our overhead absorption, our overhead expenses or overhead cost. Okay. So what I'm trying to say is that this is the basis for which we absorb our overhead cost. But let's come to ABC now. Let's come to the topic for the day. So this one is just to understand what we are coming to do here. ABC is a modeling technique for apportionment and absorption of overhead costs. Just as we absorbed overhead costs here, ABC is also a technique for absorbing our overhead costs. But you see, here we are using it based on labor hours, based on machine hours, and based on production units. Here we are going to use based on activities that the entity incurred. So when we talk about activity-based costing, we are virtually looking at the other technique or other apportionment or absorption of overhead costs on the basis of what activities. The criticism that was laid against traditional, absorption rates, the overhead absorption rate, is that when we come to the broader manufacturing organization or modern organization, which are complex in nature, you can see that few costs can be related to labor costs. Just few. Most of the costs are attributed to the activities the entity incurred in the business. So if you want to apportion your production overhead costs on the basis of machine hours, on the basis of labor hours, it is not prudent. Those items that are creating these overhead costs are activities, not labor hours. Labor hours, in fact, the cost of labor is few. In fact, is very minimal when you compare it with what the overhead cost. For this matter, the ABC was propounded for the apportionment and for the absorption of overhead costs, because those things that create those costs, those things that create those overhead costs are the activities that the entity undertake in the business. The activities the entity undertake in the business. So if you want to look at ABC, it's another technique for absorption of overhead costs. Then on the basis of what? On the basis of activities. On the basis of activities. So if you come to a typical organization, they may have several activities. They may have several activities that goes in there. We can look at material purchasing and handling. Material purchasing and handling is one of the typical activity that goes in there. We can look at customer order and processing. They are all activities that an entity partake in. We can look at purchasing. These are all related to production. We can also look at selling and distribution, which has to do with the operating expenses. So selling and distribution activities, they relate to operating expenses. But if you look at the first theory, we are looking at the material purchasing, customer order processing. We are looking at the purchasing. We are looking at quality control. We are looking at packaging. All these are activities that create the overhead cost, where we see the cost of labor to be minimal. So for this purpose, the ABC concept is saying that we should absorb these overhead costs on the basis of activities that the entity was. Okay. So these are some of the activities. For you to be able to understand or to do ABC, which is activity-based costing, you will need to understand what we call cost drivers. You have to understand what we call cost drivers. Cost drivers. Cost drivers. Cost drivers. This is not the normal driver. This is cost management accounting cost driver. Now, when we talk about cost drivers are factors that influences their cost, that influences or that determine the cost of an activity. Cost driver, they are factors that determine the cost of an activity. So if you are talking about a cost driver, we are looking at the factors that determine the cost of an activity. So let's come to material purchasing. We are looking at number of material purchase. Number of material purchase becomes the cost driver because this number will tell us the total number of cost or the total cost we are incurring under material purchasing. If you come to customer ordering, we are looking at number of what? Of order. Number of order. If you are looking at purchasing, we are looking at a purchasing unit or number of purchase or purchasing units or purchasing per product. So when you talk about cost driver, we are basically looking at the factor or the factors that determine the cost of an activity. Don't forget the factors that determine the cost of an activity. For you to really calculate or apportion your overhead cost, you barely have to know the cost driver that goes with each activity. So in questions, they will give you the activities, then they will give you the cost driver separately. It is left with you to link which of the cost driver that goes with each activity or each respective activity. So the cost driver in each respective activity or the activity and each respective cost driver. It is a technique you must employ to understand which cost driver goes with which activity. Which cost driver goes with which activity. That has to do with cost driver. You also have to look at what we call cost pool. Cost pool. Cost pool. Cost pool is just the same as the total overhead cost of a particular activity. So if you have determined the total overhead cost of a material to be, let's say, $400,000, this total overhead cost of the material is what we are looking at the cost pool. So after you have determined the total cost of a particular activity, we call it the cost pool. After you have determined the total overhead cost of an activity, we call it a cost pool. That is cost pool. These things are very important when you want to really appreciate activity-based costing. So far, when we talk about activity-based costing, it's another means of apportionment or absorption of overhead cost that is based on what activities the entity incurs. I've mentioned that some of the activities that an entity can partake in. We have also looked at cost driver. They are the items, they are the factors that determine the cost of an activity. They are the drives. They are the channel, the medium which we can know the total number of total value of a particular activity or total cost of a particular activity. That has to do with the cost driver. Having understood this, we have to now go through the steps of how to determine or how to apportion our overhead cost using ABC. How do we apportion overhead cost using ABC? The books that we have, none of them have given steps, but I'm going to give you some key steps that you must take when you want to apportion overhead cost using activity-based costing. Remember, activity-based costing is also important because if you come to one of the budgeting approaches, it has to do with activity-based costing. So you can also use activity-based costing in budgeting. So you really have to understand the concept over here so that you can also apply it in your budgeting process. So the steps that we need, or the steps we are supposed to go through in order for us to apportion our overhead cost, total overhead cost, using A, B, C. All right. So step number one in apportioning and overhead costs using activity-based costing. Step number one is to identify each activities in the organization. So the first step is to identify each activities. So step number two is determine the cost drivers. So the cost drivers for each activity you have identified. For each activity identify in step one. So at step one, you identify all the activities in the organization. Then step two, you identify the cost driver that goes with each activity. The cost driver that goes with each activity. Now the step three is to determine the total costs. Determine the total cost of each product cost driver. Each product cost driver. Determine the total cost of each product cost driver and total activity cost. So at step three, you have to determine, you see, we can have one product, but that one product may have 3 activities or 4 activities contributing to the overhead cost. So all those 4 activities will have their respective cost drivers. So sum up the respective cost driver for each product. So here we can have product X and product Y. Product X and product Y, and we can have maybe a number of setups. The number of setups will be here for X, will be here for Y. We need the total of these two. So we need it in the total of the two. Then the next step is step 4. Step 4 is to determine the overhead absorption rate for each activity. For each activity. So we determine the overhead absorption rate for each activity. Then step 5. So this one is basically your total activity cost, total activity overhead cost, all divided by the total cost driver that you have determined here. So total product cost driver, the one you determine at step 4. So the one you determine at step 3, okay, the total product cost driver. We will take a full question and go through the steps. Don't worry. So that is step 4. Now step 5. Step 5 is after you determine the overhead absorption rate for each activity, you now have to apportion the activity overhead cost to the respective products. So you apportion. Activity overhead cost to the respective product, and then the last step has to do with steps number 6. Determine the what's the name, overhead cost per unit. So by step 5, we have determined the total overhead cost that goes for each product. Then you divide it by the total number of units produced under the product. You divide it to get the last portion, which has to do with determining the overhead cost per unit. So these are the 6 steps you are supposed to go through if you want to apportion and overhead cost using activity-based costing. So we are going to solve a question, and I'll place the question link under the video, under the description, under the video description. So I'll place the question link under the video description. So we are going to take one full question, a very complex one. Then we'll go through the question from A to Z. So please, if you want to get access to the question, go to the video description. The question link will be there. Thank you. Okay, so let's go to the question first. It said the details of unit cost. So here, pay attention to the question. So the details of a unit cost of a product X, Y, Z. So here we are looking at three different products have been provided below. The unit cost. The unit cost. So if you look at it, we have if you look at the question, so the question, you can get access to it at the video description. You can get access to this question at the video description. They are saying that the demand, the total number of units we need for X is 1,200. Total number of units we need for Y is 2,800, and the unit we need for Z is 3,000. Now their unit costs, we have the direct material. Remember, these are direct costs. We don't need any apportionment. We have direct labor cost. We have variable overheads. We have variable overheads over there, and we have fixed overhead. We have fixed overhead. Now let's look at the additional information. They said the fixed overheads were absorbed at the rate of 8 Ghana cedis per machine hour. The fixed overhead that we have in the question, they were absorbed at the rate of 8 Ghana cedis per machine hour. It's simply telling us that if you want to know our machine hours that were used in the question, our machine hours, we have to take the fixed overheads divided by the rate that was given to us will give us the machine hours for the respective products. So for instance, we are looking at product X, product Y, product Z. So from the question, the fixed overhead cost for X is, I think, 32. Is 32. Then we have 24, and then we have 20. They are saying that the rate, it was absorbed on the rate of 80. So we divide this by 8. We divide this by 8. We divide this by 8. So here we are going to get 4 hours over here, 4 machine hours. So the machine hours, please, you will need it. You need machine hours per unit. Per unit is 4 hours. This will give us 3 hours. I think this will give us 3 points. Let me calculate. So 20 divided by 8, that is 2.5 hours. So we need these machine hours. We need these machine hours. We need these machine hours. Okay, so let's continue with additional information. They said the budgeted fixed overheads can be analyzed into the following cost pools. Cost pools. So in this question again, we have been given total budgeted fixed overhead to be $165,600. So this is our total budgeted overhead cost. We are going to apportion to the respective products. Now the cost pool, I mentioned the cost pool earlier that they are the total budgeted cost to respective activities. In this question, they didn't share this cost for us, but they have given us percentage. So if you look at the question, we have a batch taking 20%. We have machinery taking 45% of the overhead cost. So here, let's look at this also. This is also not given to us in the question. You barely have to calculate for it. So we have the activity and then the overhead cost of the activity. So we have batch. Batch is an activity taking 20%. Taking 20%. So we multiply the 20 by the total overhead cost. So 165,600 times 0.2. That is giving us 33,120. So this will be in dollars. That goes to, this is the total, total overhead cost that goes to the batch as an activity. Then we have machinery. We have machinery, which is taking, the question is taking 45%. 45%. So 45% of this figure. So the figure times 45%, we are getting 74,520. So you see, they didn't give us the respective overhead costs for each of the activities, but they have given us the percentages that we have in the total overhead cost. So we need to calculate it before we can get the cost pool. Remember, this is the cost pool or the total overhead cost to the activities. We also have customer service. So here we have 4 activities in the question. Customer service is the next one. Customer service is the next one, taking 25%. Taking 25%. Taking 25%. And that's giving us 41,400. It's giving us 41,400. And then we have the last one, which has to do with deliveries, which is also taking 10%. So it's going to take 16,560. Now, if you sum up this, we should get the total overhead cost. So let's try that. So 16,560 plus 41,400 plus 74,520 plus 33,120. And this is giving us the same total overhead cost over here. Now, do you remember the steps? The first one is to identify the activities. So these are the activities in the question. The next thing is to identify for each of the activities their cost drivers. So let's go. If you look at beneath the question, they said the following also relates to the activities of the company. The following also relates to the activities of the company. So we have units in a batch. This is unit in a batch. So this unit in a batch, it is not a cost driver. We need number of badges. And they are saying unit in a batch. So you see, they are confusing you. So if you don't know, you go and use the unit in a batch to be the cost driver for this. You are wrong. What we need here is number of batches. But they have given us unit in a batch. So there's something we have to do to get the number of badges, because they were giving units in a batch. You will come there. So here we need number of batches, but we were giving units in what? Batch. We need to do some computation before we can get the number of batches. Let's look at the next one. They said quantities per delivery. We need number of delivery, not quantities per delivery. Look at delivery here. We need number of delivery, not quantity, but they have given us quantity, so we need to adjust that figure. So we need number of delivery. Okay, but we were giving quantity per delivery, so we need to adjust that figures there as well. Now we're also giving number of customers. You see, that is what we need for all of them. So the number of customers does not have any issue. That would be the cost driver. Number of customers. Then with machinery, we need what? The reason for this. You see, the reason for this machine hours. So the machinery will take what? Machine hours. So don't forget, we need to adjust this. We need to adjust this and then also get their total, what's the name? Their total cost drivers, total product cost drivers. So having established each activity and their respective cost drivers, what is needed is to determine the total of the activity, which we have done already. So what is left is to determine the total of the cost drivers, How do we go about that? Okay, so let's have that one over here. So if you look at the question carefully, we have product X, we have product Y, we have product Z. Remember, we need a total of what? Of them. But with batches, we need number of batches. But we're giving quantities, unit in a batch. So for us to get the number of batches, we will take the total units produced for X. Total unit is the 1,200. We divide it by the number of the unit of badges to get the number of badges. So here will be divided by 120. The total unit produced for Y is 2,800. We divide it by the unit in a batch of 140. Then the same thing for Z, which is 3,000 divided by 200. So once you've done this, you are going to get the number of badges, which is the cost driver, not unit in a batch. Not unit in a batch, it is the number of badges. But we were given unit in a batch. So you have to divide that unit divided by the total unit to get the number of badges. So let's do the calculation. So this is going to be 1,200 divided by 1,000 divided by 120. So the first one is 10. So the number of badges here is 10. Then the second one is 2,800 divided by 140. That's giving us 20. Giving us 20 over here. And the last one has to do with 3,000 divided by 200. And that's giving us 15. 15. So we sum up this 10 plus this will give us 30. So this is going to give us a total of 45. This is for badges. Now let's go to, as for number of customers, it's already there. So let's go to number of customers. We just have to write it. We already have, we don't have to do any adjustment to the number of customers. So per the question, number of customers for X is 50. Number of customers for Y is 180. The number of customers for Z is 220. So we sum it together. So 50 plus 180 plus 220, and that is going to give us 450. 450. Now we need number of delivery, but we need number of delivery, but we were given quantities per delivery. We were given quantities per delivery. So for us to get the number of delivery, we have to do the same thing we did to the badges. So the quantities per delivery for X is 100. So we divide the 1,200 by 100. For Y is 2,800 divided by the 280, which goes to Y, and then the last one has to do with 250. So 3,000 divided by 250. 250, so that we can now get the number of delivery. So the first one will give us 120. The second one will give us 2,800 divided by 280 will give us 10. The last one, 3,000 divided by 240, 250 will give us 12. So we add this together. 1,200 divided by 100 is giving us 12 rather. So this is giving us 12. So 12 plus 10, 12 plus 10 plus another 12 is giving us 34. So the total cost driver for number of delivery is 34. We've done that of badges to be 45. Number of customers is 450, and then that of number of delivery is 34. The reason we are doing this division here is because of what we were given in the question. We need the cost driver for delivery to be what? Number of delivery, not quantities per delivery. We need the badges to be number of badges, not unit in badge. So we need to divide it by the unit to get the number of badges. That is what we've done over here. Then the last one has to do with our machine hours. We need our machine hours. We are not giving our machine hours in the question. We are not giving our machine hours, but we know that each product we need 4 hours over here. We need 4 hours over here. So each product is given us these 4 hours. So we need to take these 4 hours and multiply it by what? By the respective units produced. By the respective units produced. So here, how many hours do we need for product Z? How many hours do we need for product Z? So it's going to be 1,200 times the 4 hours. 1,200 times the 4 hours. And this is going to give us times 4. This is going to give us 4,800 hours. Then we go for 2. This is going to be 2,800 times 3. 2,800 times 3, and that's giving us 8,400 hours. Then the last one is giving us 2.5 times 3,000, and that is giving us 2.5 times 3,000 is giving us 7,500. So the total number of hours we need is 4,800 plus 8,400 plus 7,400, and this is giving us 20,700. 20,700 hours. So we need this total. Now we have this total. We have total cost drivers. Do you remember the third step? We need the total cost drivers. We now have it. We now have it for number of badges. We have it for number of customers. We have it for number of delivery. We also have it for machines. we also have the total of what? Of the activities. So what is left is to determine the overhead absorption rate for each activity. Overhead absorption rate for each activity. We need to determine the overhead absorption rate for each activity. Because of the space of the board, I'm going to clean the top part. So I'm cleaning this part so that we can determine the so we are determining, the next step is to determine the overhead absorption rate for each activity. For each activity. So we have the totals of the number of badges here already. So, and we also have the totals of the activities here. So what we need is just to write the activity. The first activity is the badge. So the overhead absorption rate will be the 33120 all divided by the total number of badges, which is 45. Then we go to number of customers. This one is customer service. The activity is customer service. Okay, so the total is 41,400. So we divide this by the total number of customers, which is 450. Then we have the next one is machinery. The total cost is 74,520, and the total activity total cost driver for machine is 20,700. And then the last one has to do with our delivery, and we are going for number of deliveries. So the total of the delivery is 16,560, all divided by the total number of what? The cost driver number of delivery to be 34. So let's check if our figures are correct. So badges is 33, machinery 74 over here, customer service is 41, and then delivery is 16,560, and then their respective cost drivers is here. So we can quickly determine their overhead absorption rate for each activity. So the first one has to do with 33,120 divided by 45, which is giving us 5. We are using that lesson, so let's use that lesson. Yeah, this is giving us 736 per number of badges. You need to bring in the number of badges. Okay, then we come to the next one, which is 41,400 divided by 450. This is going to give us 92 per number of customers. Then the third one has to be 74,520 divided by 20,700 hours. This is giving us 3.6, which is per machine. And the last one, 16,560 divided by 34, is giving us 487.06 per number of delivery. So from what we have on the board, we have now determined what the overhead absorption rate for each activity. So obviously in the process, first we identify the activities, and then their respective total overhead cost. Done that. Second, we identify each cost driver for each activity. In this question, we are not giving the cost driver straight away. We have to do something to the figures for us to get the cost drivers. That is what we have done over here. Or because we're giving unit in batch, but we need number of batch, so we need to divide the total unit of the product by by the respective badges. Okay, by the respective unit in a batch for each product. That's what we've done here to get the number of badges. We did the same thing for delivery, because we are not giving number of delivery, we're giving quantities per delivery. And then also the machine hours, we're just giving the machine hours, but we need the total hours. Don't forget, we are portioning these total overhead cost here, which was 160, I think 5,700 or 600. If you sum up this, so this is what we are apportioning, but we are using what another basis of apportioning, which is the which is the activity-based costing. Activity-based costing. All right. Then our next step is to now share this cost. You see, this batch, we want to share it among X, Y, and Z, because if you come to the batch as an activity, the total overhead is this. How do we share it to the product? Because we are determining the cost per product. So how do we share this value here to the respective product? That is the next step. We have to allocate, or in fact apportion, the activity total cost to the respective product. How do we do that? That will be our next step. Okay, so we didn't even look at the requirement of the question, but we assume that will be the requirement. If you look at the requirement, it said calculate the activity rate per batch. So activity rate per batch, that is what we have done here. So the first requirement is what we have done here. If you look at the I, they say calculate the total cost of unit of product X. Calculate the total cost of unit of product X. So we will do for only X. Then I will leave the Y. Once we've done Y, X, we can do Y and then the Z. So we will do for X. How do we get the total cost for X? How do we get the total cost for X? So total cost. Did you say cost per unit? This is total cost, okay? But I'll also do the cost per unit so that you can have an understanding over there. So total cost of products. So I'll bring all the three products, but here our focus will be on X. I will just show you how to get it for Z as well. So we have X, Y, and then Z, and then Z. So first we take the cost driver. So let's take number of badges. So number of badges. The focus here is what is your overhead absorption rate for the badges? It is 736. We multiply it by the cost driver for X. Which is 10 years. 10 years. So we multiply it by 10. So this will go for X. In case we are doing for Y, we will take the same 736. Then we multiply it by the cost driver for Y, which is here is 20. So this value here will go under Y. In case we are doing for Z, then it will be the same 736, because all this goes to batches. 736. Then the cost driver for Z is what? Is 15. So we multiply this by 15. Then we are done with 4. So this goes to X, this goes to Z, and then this goes to Z. Then we will now go to the second one, which is number of customers. We do the same thing. What's the rate here? It's 92. We multiply it by what? The cost driver for X, which is 50. If you want to get out of Z, it's going to be the same 92 times the 180 over here. If you want to get out of this for Y, if you want to get out of the Z, it's going to be the same 92 times the cost driver for Z under the number of customers. So again, this will also go to Z. This will also go to Y. This will also go to Z. This will go to X, Y, and Z. Once you've done that, you are able to do it for all the cost drivers. Then you sum it up, you get the total cost. If you divide it by the unit produced by the this one, you are going to get the total cost per unit. So let's go. We are going to do it thoroughly for only X. Okay. Once we do it for X, you can, from this one, you can do it for Y and then and Z. So let's finish with X first. So X number of badges is there. Then we need number of customers for this one. The rate is 92. The cost driver is 50. So we multiply it by the 50. Then we need number of delivery. The overhead absorption rate for number of delivery is 487.06. We multiply it by what we have under S, which is 12. Then we need machine hours. The total overhead absorption rate is 3.6, and then that of it is 4,000 That of X is 4,800. So once we multiply it, we are going to get the total cost for X. So let's do that. So 736 times 10. That gives us 7360. Then 92 times 50. That is giving us 4,600. 4,600. And then we have what we call 487.06 times 12 is giving us 5,844.72. This is going for the number of delivery, and then the last one is 3.6 times 4,800, and that's giving us 17,280. 17,280. So we sum it up. Once we sum it up, that is going to be the total overhead of 7,360 plus 5,600 plus 5,844.72 plus 17280. 17280. So we are going to get 35,084.72, and this is going to be our overhead cost, total overhead cost. If you need your total overhead cost per unit, okay, per unit, then we divide all these by the total unit of X. Total unit of X is here. That is 1,200. So we divide the total by 1,200, and we are going to get the cost per unit of 29.24. 29.24. But the question is demanding for the total cost. So you don't need the total. The question is saying we should calculate the total cost of units. Total cost of units. Total cost of units. So this is just the total cost of overhead. This is just the total overhead cost. So after getting this total overhead cost, you now go and add your prime cost to it to get your total cost. Don't forget, your total cost is made up of your prime cost and then your overhead cost. Your prime cost and then your overhead cost. Your prime cost and then your overhead cost. So if you want to do for Y, you do the same thing. So you take the rate of the batch 736, then you go for the cost driver that goes with what, by 20. So you multiply by 20. If you want to get for Z, it's going to be the rate, the same 736 times what? Times 15. Then you are done with batches. Then you take the next cost driver, which has to do with number of customers. You do the same thing for Y. At the end of the day, you will still get the same, you will get the total cost. Then if you want to get the overhead cost per unit, you divide it by the unit produced by what? By Y. That will give you the overhead cost per unit. Now, the final thing we are supposed to do is to get the total cost for Y. Total cost for Y. Remember, total cost is going to be the prime cost plus our overhead cost. We have determined the overhead cost here. It's left with us to determine our prime cost. So let's go. So this should have even been total overhead cost. Okay, it should have been total overhead cost. So I'm in the top so that we can have our total overhead here. Don't forget the question is in the question link is in the video description, and get access to the question overhead. Okay, so let's look at total cost for product X, for product X. So we have it on our dollar sign. So we need to go to the question, the very first part. We have our direct material cost. And remember, this direct material cost is per unit. It's per unit. Okay. So it's 70 over here. Let me bring it closer small. Direct material cost is 70. Do we have direct labor? Yes, we have direct labor. We have direct labor cost to be 65. And then we also have variable overhead. We have variable overhead cost of 11. And then our overhead cost, yeah, this one, our fixed fixed overhead cost. So since these are per unit, we have to also bring the per unit, which is 29.24 we have determined. So we sum everything up. So 70 plus 65 plus 11. You see, I didn't include the last figure because that is what we have apportioned. That is what we have apportioned. The fees overhead is what we have apportioned. So so if you add everything, you're going to get 175, 175, 175.23, 175.23. Now we now multiply this per unit. So we now multiply this by, so units produced is 1,200. So we now multiply this by the units produced to get our total cost. So this times 175.23 times 1,200. 175.23 times 1,200, and it's giving us 210,000, 276, 276. So that becomes the total cost for product X. You can go through the same process and you get a total cost for Y. You get a total cost for Z. So please, this is activity-based costing, where we apportion our overhead cost on the basis of activities that the entity partake in or that the entity undertake in the business. Do not forget that this is more prudent to compare it with your traditional costing bill, where they use the overhead absorption rate on the basis of labor hour, which labor hour contributes just a minimal amount to the total overhead cost. So the question that we've solved, the link will be provided in the video description. You can get access to the question and then follow the solution. Thank you. Do not forget to subscribe and share with others. Thank you.